What's up guys, welcome to Wasted Space, and I'd like to talk a little bit about a game and a series that I really love, but want to talk about in a perspective that I think is a little bit away from the norm for this particular series. So in this case, I'm talking about XCOM and obviously the recently released XCOM 2. So I love XCOM in general, started playing it back Terror from the Deep era on a friend's Amiga. Basically used to go around to his place and I'd while away hours playing Terror from the Deep with him over my shoulder trying to tell me how I'm doing it very wrong. And of course I was, because young and had no idea what I was doing really. Since then, kind of enjoyed most of them. Obviously there was that big gap between sort of the end of the classic series, if you want to call that, and then the coming along of XCOM Enemy Unknown and Enemy Within, and this kind of new revival of the XCOM games. And in general, they are awesome games because they managed to do something cool that I think nothing else in the genre has quite managed, which is encourage people like myself, who wouldn't normally play strategy games, wouldn't normally play turn-based strategy games, I should say, to actually dive in and enjoy a game like that. Because somehow XCOM manages to sort of break some of those boundaries that the normal turn-based game has. So I guess I should kick off by talking about XCOM 2 and a little bit about why I like it, but I don't really want this to be a review impressions. I just want to leave you with the impression that I actually really love this game, because there are some bits towards the end of this that I'm going to say they're going to be pretty critical. So kicking off, single player game is an awesome experience. I love the storyline continuity from the previous game. For those of you who haven't played it, basically the storyline in the previous game is that aliens have shown up and they're starting to mess with Earth. And you believe, if you've completed the game, that you're relatively successful in fighting them off. The second game then picks up a number of years later where it turns out that you failed, and in fact all you were fighting off was some advanced force, and there was a huge load of them afterwards. They've come down and you lost. So the world is now under the control of this group called the Advent, and they're starting to mess with human genealogy, mix it with the genealogy of the aliens, which is kind of what these aliens do. It's their thing. So all of the aliens you fight are supposed to be sort of races they've assimilated over the time. So in XCOM 1, you were representing the force of man as a whole, basically. You were our last hope and our attempt to fight back against this alien invasion force. In this game, you're now representing a resistance army. The world in general has accepted these aliens on board, and you are representing a small resistance that don't believe they're here for good purposes. And the storyline kind of unfolds from there. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but from that perspective, it is a pretty cool storyline. I'm pretty happy with how they've done it. Now, some of the things they changed from XCOM Enemy Within and Enemy Unknown, the recent ones, were, for a lot of people, things that I've heard as negatives. So there's things like there's now a very strict turn timer on a lot of the missions. And because of how they've changed both your classes, playing as a kind of resistance-y sort of setup, these turn timers and some of the objectives, the game itself feels much more fast-paced than it used to. So there's a lot less of this sitting back, advancing slowly turn by turn, setting Overwatch, which enables you to shoot at anything that moves during the enemy's turn, and just sort of being very cautious, to this new approach where you actually start every map stealthed so the enemy can't, or almost every map I should say, so the enemy can't see you, and you've got this wonderful sort of fluid, quite fast-paced approach to all of these maps, because you can start off by positioning yourself really well for an ambush, and then all of the abilities combined with these quite strict turn timers means that you're pushed into playing really fast-paced, really quickly, and the game rewards you for it. So that's all great. Great story, great gameplay. There are some niggles to it. There are some little buggy things that have existed both in Enemy Unknown and this one that, I don't know, they don't ruin the gameplay, but you'll notice them. There are definitely some pauses that just seem to be for no apparent reason at all. The game will just go, no, I'm thinking for a second here. Give me a moment. And it does it often enough that at times it can slow things down a lot. And then there are some graphical weirdness at times, and there's definitely some interesting stuff with people capable of shooting through buildings when they shouldn't be able to. That sort of idea. The usual XCOM stuff, really. Where I want to approach this from that's slightly different, having talked a lot about basically how I love the game, is an area in which I feel like they've missed an opportunity, and that's talking about multiplayer. Now, in the old games, you're talking about the classic series, there was no multiplayer, because in the end you're talking about playing it on an Amiga. Multiplayer wasn't really a consideration at that point. And since then it seems like multiplayer turn-based, with some notable exceptions like things like Civilization, for example, hasn't really taken off a huge amount. Especially when you look at games like XCOM style. So there's a few others around at the moment that are pretty cool. You can talk about stuff like The Escapists, for example, or Xenonauts, which has got very good ratings as well. And none of these seem to do the multiplayer thing. XCOM's pretty alone in that respect. But the way it does it is... So, in Enemy Unknown and in the most recent one, it is a 1v1 scenario where you pick a team and you go up against a friend, 1v1 on a map of your choosing, and that's pretty much it. There's no storyline, there's nothing like that, and there's also a few bits where you think, oh cool, actually I could have some fun with this, and then it hasn't gone as far as you'd like. So in this case, I'm talking about how you set up your squads. You have this points mechanic system, very much like some of the old Warhammer games. I'm thinking Dark Omen here. I had great fun in that game building armies more than anything else. I mean, I enjoyed playing with them, don't get me wrong. But it was the customization you could go to. You got this points value and you can tweak all of your individual units to make that points value work for you in the way you want. And everything is styled like you want. In XCOM, they present you with these points values for these units. They present you with the point limit and you think, great, cool, okay, I'll start off with these as a basis and then I'll go and modify them. And immediately you run into the problem that you can't. There is a single slot available that you can change for all of your soldiers, and when it comes to the Advent stuff, all you can do is change their name. So what it means is, in general, you immediately met with this system that kind of had promise and then wasn't properly fulfilled. You've got a pretty run-of-the-mill team regardless of what you do. Which you can kind of accept. Multiplayer is a bit of an unusual one. And then you actually go and try and play. And I've had a few games now in XCOM 2, and I had a few games in the original XCOM. And in general, the impression you're left with is afterthought, honestly. Because that pausing, that slowness that's present in single player is basically times by 10 when you get to multiplayer. And on top of that, there's all these weird glitches and bugs and things not spawning in the right place, animations not going off correctly. Just generally, it feels like a pretty clunky. And one of our games actually took an hour and 40 minutes. And I'm going to try and use some footage in the background side by side so you can see both perspectives at once. And tell me why it took so long, because I can't work it out. It's just doing something behind the scenes. So you've got a limited potential when it comes to your squad layout, and then you've got a pretty frustrating game when you do get in. And then finally, and this is pretty odd and I guess was done for balance reasons, but when you do then get into the multiplayer game, you'll quite quickly notice that especially the alien units, the Advent stuff, doesn't have the same selection of abilities, and more importantly, they don't have the same number of action points, so the number of moves they can make as they would do in single player. So I don't want to talk too much about this because I haven't tested this side of things fully and worked out what exactly they're trying to achieve with it, whether it's balance, what exactly is going on. But the end result is, it's not like you can go into multiplayer and expect to do any sort of, theory crafting or any testing for your single player experience, because as soon as you get there, a lot of what you learnt in single player is completely irrelevant, it's completely changed. So that's all well and good. How do we fix that? What could they do that would be different to this? Well, firstly, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm in this sort of rigid scenario where you've got a map and two teams that you can build, I'm not really very interested in doing 1v1s against friends of mine, especially not in a game that, a bit like XCOM, has no competitive side to it. There's no big sort of online experience side to it. The multiplayer's there for, as far as I can tell, a bit of a laugh and somewhat as an afterthought. So why not make it co-op? Why not have it so that instead of this 1v1 stuff, we can set up an AI enemy team, and then we can share somehow our team between us. So say you have 6 troopers in XCOM, say we control 3 each. Or say you increase the squad size to 8, we get 4 each, and then you make the Advent more powerful to balance that out. And in the end, you get this cool tactical experience where you're having to work with a friend to come over some sort of difficulty. Then maybe even go a step further than that. So drawing sort of, I hate to say this, but some inspiration from some of the earlier Call of Duty games, like the original Modern Warfare 2, that had that cool co-op campaign in them. Now, it wasn't linked by some big storyline. There was no in-between sort of cutscenes or anything like that. Because especially with something like XCOM, that wouldn't really work. Who controls your base? Who controls the Avenger? Who does all of those bits if you are trying to play the campaign as a co-op? But what it did do was set up individual missions, which had a cool story around them, and then a bunch of cool events in them for you to go and sort of experience with someone else. And it became this fun tactical experience on TeamSpeak with a friend. And, you know, if you wanted to do it on the harder difficulties, you really had to think and plan and work together. And I can imagine XCOM being exactly like that, but in this turn-based environment. Now, it does seem like Firaxis, the guys who develop XCOM, they aren't so interested in the multiplayer side of things, I don't think. I think we would have seen more development in that area, rather than what I believe is actually a step backwards in this game, if they were really keen to make that a big part of XCOM. What they have done, though, which, I mean, hats off to them, this is absolutely awesome. When they made the decision to be a PC-only title, that seems to be tied into the fact that PCs support modding properly. And so we've got this great built-in modding support, we've got workshop support, and a lot of facilities to enable modders to really go crazy with it. So I kind of hope deep down that maybe the guys who made the Long War mod for XCOM Enemy Unknown can somehow find a way of modding co-op, even in a limited fashion, into XCOM to show everyone how cool that could be. So what do you guys think? Co-op in a game like this, would it work? Is that kind of the solution to give games like this sort of multiplayer experience, instead of it being purely a single player experience, a single player vibe, albeit a really good one? But, you know, how cool would it be if we were to expand it? So what do you guys think about that? And what do you guys think about this video? Because I did say I was going to do some other content, and this is definitely that. Not sure what it is, kind of critical, but let's be clear, I love XCOM, I love what Firaxis are doing with it. The only thing I'm saying with this is, isn't that a missed opportunity? Wasn't that an area in which we could have had some really cool features and really cool development? Either way, guys, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit like, please hit subscribe. It does really help me in the channel out. And if you didn't, don't just hit that dislike button. Please let me know down in the comments how I can improve, what I can do to make the videos more fun for you. And all the information about XCOM 2, if you do want to check it out, is down in the video description just below. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I will catch you next time.